It is Saturday, July 25th. I'm Ben Dole here with Aryeh Schwartz. This is Winsidr Daily, our first episode here in this 2020 season. We're trying something a little different with this show here. The goal here is to be a little more brief and just casual, catch you up on the games. If you missed them all, we can kind of help keep you up to date. Hopefully, we can be a go-to source for you for that. And if you're locked in for all of them, we want to kind of be able to help add some value there and just kind of fill a little bit of a gap where there's not a ton of post-game coverage and you can't flip on the TV and radio and listen to a bunch of live stuff the next day. So that's kind of the goal with this. And Arya, it's opening day's finally here. Just what was your general impressions of the day and finally flipping on some live games?
It was fun. It was exciting. Like I woke up really early. I was like a kid before Hanukkah, you know? I woke up early. I was all excited for the present that is WNBA basketball.
Yeah, we got Seattle 87, New York 71. The Seattle Storm, they get their 2018 championship winning starting lineup back on the floor. And of course, New York with their class full of rookies led by Sabrina Ionescu. They get things off to a start. And I think the obvious starting point is just, hey, we got to see Brianna Stewart and Sue Bird back on the floor. And, for one game, for an opener, I think things look pretty good for Seattle. I think they're going to be in a pretty good spot to get out to a good start here and more or less pick up where they left off.
I agree. My one concern, and I know the quick answer, is Natasha Howard, a player who really flourished last year, just did not look like she was game ready. I know she turned up late to the wobble, and that's kind of been the story of. Well, we'll get to that with the fever, but turning up late to the wobble definitely has its effects when it was a short training camp. I like short in general, just because of how little basketball these players have played of recent, but normal length and typical. But Jewel Lloyd, can we talk about Jewel Lloyd for a second here? She was just fire until she banged up her back. Came back, still had some moments, but are we talking about the year of the Lloyd?
Yeah, I mean, like to touch on the injury stuff. Yeah, Jewel Lloyd left the game. Looked like she fell pretty hard on her back. Kia Nurse also left with an ankle injury, and Morgan Tuck was listed as probable, didn't play. Jasmine Jones also probable, didn't play. But with Jewel, she gets to settle back in an ideal role for herself, right? It's you have Bird back there running the show, and she's also such this awesome shooter that she has so much pull away from the ball, and you have you're playing with the MVP again. It's just the court just looks so much different for her, and I think what got lost in the shuffle was I think it's okay to kind of call last year a lost year. I think in hindsight, people may just kind of look at the stat line for the season, but she had that ankle injury. It was tough to get back, and she kind of can settle into a good role for herself here, to just come off screens and give them some scoring.
Well, I'll say this. I mean, the Liberty this year are basically the Storm last year in the sense of it's a developmental season. You're not expected to pull off any big wins. Yeah, you'll do all right. I mean, the Storm outkicked the coverage last year, but it was more the main story was with all the injuries they had, the ability to get the development of Mercedes Russell, of Jordan Canna. We keep hearing about this. Jordan Canna looked amazing. Mercedes Russell was showing off like her range is spreading out a little bit more. The Storm are known for being a team that anybody is a threat from deep. And I remember speaking to Mercedes last season about how that's like the next element she wants to work on, which would just be ridiculous for that lineup. And once Howard gets back to game shape, I mean, this team is who we thought they were, as we keep saying. And you want to talk about Ezzy a little bit?
Sure, yeah, and I guess just kind of Seattle's bench in general. Seattle starters, Stewart had played the most at 28 minutes. Uh, they didn't have to really stretch themselves too far in game one, and they had Gary Kloppenberg went five bench players at a time for a few spots there, and yeah, Izzy Magbugor made her debut. Uh, she's long, she's lean, she can move her feet a little bit. She had a play, got switched out onto Ionescu and ended up stripping her, and that I tweeted that one out, and that was fun just to see her out there, as the fourth big, kind of her and Crystal Langhorne battling for minutes. I think it's a pretty good spot for her to be in to kind of ease in year one, which ties in with what you said about Mercedes Russell.
Let's flip it over to Liberty. I mean, everyone's just talking about Sabrina. Sabrina, Sabrina, Sabrina. That's all I saw on Twitter. But I, is it a hot take to say that she wasn't the best rookie on the court today?
I don't know. I mean, I don't really think that question is like very interesting. It's because again, it's just like pushing, to where it becomes like this self fulfilling prophecy that people are, I think, a little tempted to do with Sabrina. Just talking about her all the time. Like Seattle's an aggressive defense. They were gonna try to get the ball out of her hands, and I think what people might miss, like they shot 6 for 28 from three. Like, yeah, that's not good, but if you really want to like get into it, like they're missing once Kia Nurse left the game, they're missing like 5 of their 6 best shooters between Nurse, Megan Walker, still in quarantine, and then a couple of the players that opted out. But are we? Was that alluding to Jocelyn Willoughby, or did you have somebody else that
Yeah,
stood out to
no.
you?
I mean, Odom was looking good too. I mean, I just think there's the main reason I wanted to bring this up was because on Twitter and on the show, like all we talked about was Sabrina, and I would love to give some attention to some of these other young players.
Yeah. So on Willoughby, I think the interesting thing, I pretty late in the game, I was really started to be excited about her heading into the draft, and I kind of thought she was an interesting player for somebody to grab, like in that late first round range, which is where she ended up going. And I felt like Phoenix made a mistake, like letting her go. Uh, and Rebecca Lobo, I remember, like on the draft, she called her a 3-4 hybrid, and I kind of wondered about the four side of that. She's listed at 6 foot, so I was like, okay, is like I kind of want to see, if she can just be physical and just kind of bang a little bit when she needs to. But like just seeing her run up and down with some of those front court players, like absolutely, like she is really strong. She has really long arms. Like she defends really hard. I think she's going to be talked about as a positive defender, like, very early in her career, which doesn't happen for a lot of rookies. So yeah, I mean, I think that's somebody to be really excited about, and I think I guess kind of depending on what you're expecting from New York, you can call it a bright spot, but they're playing Seattle, so like I kind of expected a lot of what happened results wise, but yeah, I think it was a good start for Willoughby.
Let's talk about Clarendon real briefly. I'm a known hater for her. That's fine. But she drops 20. She got to the line a ton, hitting 10 of 12 free throws, 5 for 9 on the field goals. She had a great game. I mean, she was out there. She was getting calls. She was getting to the paint. It's going to be interesting for me. Can she keep up that energy? Because she was running around like the Energizer Bunny all game. My take is, and I know you might disagree with me. I think a lot of people are going to disagree with me. She's going to put up some great numbers this season just because of the fact that she's one of 4 vets on this team, and there's just going to be a lot relied on her. And as Walt has talked about, he plans, at least for the foreseeable future, to always have her or Sabrina on the court or together. So she's going to get a lot of minutes, a lot of attention. She's definitely a capable player, but obviously, look, she's not going to win you a championship or carry your team to the playoffs.
Yeah, we disagree on that. I think you're being way too hard on her. Leisure looked good. Like she played really good. Like we're keeping an eye on a lot of players, and coaches have brought it up a ton, right? That they don't want to overtax their players too soon. You're trying to be mindful of minutes. Well, I think Leisure is going to be gassed kind of in a good way, because she just has like the slider, on aggressiveness, whatever you want to call it, is like all the way up to 100. Like it looked really good in game one, just specific to her, just constantly attacking, looking to get in the lane. And when they have some of the players that did play today, and hopefully Megan Walker joins them, Key Nurse gets back quickly. When they have a little bit more shooting, Leisure has some more potent options to kick it out to. But if she's getting to the free throw line and she just finishes well enough at the rim, like, which I don't think that's, I don't think that's a stretch to think any of that happens. Like, I think it was an awesome signing for them.
Anything else you want to talk about with the Liberty?
With the Liberty, we got a Kia Stokes transition spot up 3. That was pretty awesome to see. Just like, because like the players that start to shoot them, right, you usually expect like, there's the moments where they catch it and maybe they hesitate on some of them and don't take it, or they might travel because they overthink it. But it's just like she had taken one or two before that point, but just like she ran the wing, catch, like fired it, like okay, like that's pretty cool, like for that to be your first one. Uh, we've heard out of New York that they were trying to get her more comfortable, and they felt they were kind of pleasantly surprised with what they thought her ability was there. And hey, it's not going overboard, but like it's pretty cool to see that from a you know what she can do on the other end of the floor. So if she's doing that for you, that's huge because they want to play five out.
Yeah, I mean, hey, they're gonna have to use that, and it's gonna have to like that element of her game is gonna have to grow, and it's a long term goal for this team, I think. But like I said, it's a developmental season for this team. Uh, Anything else with Liberty?
Yeah, maybe quickly. Nurse, as mentioned, only ended up playing about 9 minutes because of the ankle. Amanda Zowie B got up seven threes, and I think that's huge for her. Like that, that's and it shouldn't be a shock. Like she's been billed as a stretch big all along, right? Like that's kind of been the hope that it doesn't have to be every single thing. Like it doesn't have to be the only thing she does, but like I think that's kind of one of the headlines, and just to see her looking to get up those shots, I think that's a positive for them. You mentioned Liana Odom, playing the 3-4, like it kind of fluid for them. When she's out there, like with Willoughby, um, I think maybe a little bit of a misnomer almost is we talked about New York, or I know I did a little bit, like that New York was going to go small, right? But then like you see it out there, like Willoughby, like I mentioned, like how strong, how long her arms are. Odom in the same way, maybe not as built, but really long, really good athlete. Like they're gonna have a bunch of size with these wing players that they're playing. So I think that's a positive for them. Kylie Shook and Joyner Holmes, the other two rookies, they only played about 10 minutes. I'm interested with Kylie Shook. I think she's another one that defensively will look pretty good sooner rather than later for them. And I would like to see her getting up some threes, which I'm sure she's going to do.
I they're the watching the game. I got more excited about the roster. I'm not gonna lie.
Yeah, I mean it's just like when you when you see it for what it is, it's fun, right? Like we don't see teams like totally reset like this in this dramatic a fashion, right? So it's going to be fun throughout the season to
At all.
see each of these players kind of find their way when they're all getting these chances at the same time to play, right? Like a lot of these teams, it's like they have the one rookie, they have maybe two, and even that player might not play. So it's just a totally different situation than we're used to seeing.
If you like our show, please consider joining our Patreon community. For less than a cup of coffee a month, you can directly show support for the hard work we do covering the W. And don't forget to check out our amazing writing content on winsidr.com. Let's talk about the Mercury and the Sparks, a game that started off pretty close, and then the third quarter hit. And when the third quarter hit, the Sparks just freaking ran away with it. Um, I was, I don't know if shock's the right word, but how seamlessly this team flowed as if it really picked up with a chip on their shoulder from the way that last season ended. Got to give a shout out to Simone Augustus and Nneka Ogwumike. The combination of them did not miss anything at all day long. Just cold blooded, 100% field goal percentage. I mean, Candace Parker looked mid-season form, and we obviously always say Candace Parker is kind of like the gauge of how's this team doing. If Candace Parker is doing great, this team's doing great. And I know this season is going to be the season of Chelsea Gray, but I still think there's going to be an element of leveling this team based on Candace Parker.
Yeah, it was interesting. It yeah. On one hand, not having Christy Tolliver, who's your big uh, acquisition, it was a shock to the system because immediately upon seeing that, they were a team that was immediately discussed as one of the most loaded teams in the league. But yet they still returned. There is something to returning a group of five that played a lot together, and that's for one where I think Phoenix has some changes that they're kind of trying to feel their way through. And you mentioned Simone, like it was for her, like it's just good to see that she's healthy, right? Like last year she just wasn't able to hit the ground running. And I thought one pretty interesting thing that LA did was they kind of went small. They threw out like three of Tiara Ruff and Pratt, Simone Augustus, Brittany Sykes, uh, as opposed to playing two bigs together when it wasn't Candace Parker and Nneka Ogwumike together, and that was pretty interesting. I think that in a way that was kind of a part that things look good out there for them when they did that, and I like that they tried it right away. They had Marie Gulich out with an ankle, but I like that they tried it right away, and I think that it was it was a good move from Derek Fisher on day one.
Yeah, I'm big fan. Liked everything he did today. I mean, you're talking about the Sparks. You're talking about the team that, in my opinion, showed out the best this today on opening day and kind of sent a message to the league. Um, let's flip it over. Unless you want to talk about anything else with the Sparks, I want to talk about this Mercury team because I knew there was going to be some growing pains with them, and it wasn't going to all of a sudden happen. But I think we kind of expected it to work a little bit better. Just to recap, Sparks 99, Mercury 76 in the final of that game.
I mean, the third quarter they weren't scoring, and their defense wasn't very good. Like those are two. That's a vicious cycle to get caught in, and the game unraveled from there. You know, really big picture. Ultimately, I think we saw good things from Skylar Diggins Smith and Diana Taurasi. Just seeing them on the floor. I mean, Skylar is going to help them so much now. Just having someone that can constantly get in the lane, like that is going to help the rest of their team so much. And Taurasi, like you saw a couple plays where she's driving in there, and it's good to see that because if someone was still struggling with the back and hamstring issues, they wouldn't be doing that stuff, right? So I think ultimately those two things were most important. But I guess you're getting at you want to talk at the other, about the other stuff too.
Well, I mean, Brittany Griner, man. Like, what? It was just classic Brittany Griner to me, where, you know, she early foul. She started off looking good, early foul trouble, and then disappeared for the rest of the day. And it's just frustrating for me. I saw someone tweet this. It was kind of a hot take, kind of a bold take. Somebody was like, the best thing for Brittany Griner's MVP candidacy was not watching her play for a very long period of time. I don't remember who said that. Props to you for being cold blooded, but like, there's something to it. I'm a big fan of Brittany Griner, but then every time I watch her play, I get so frustrated that she's not
Yeah,
reaching her potential.
I didn't see that. Like for today, one Phoenix is going to have to figure out. Last year they were played at one of the slowest paces in the league, so you're able to get down, set it up, throw it in, and they had to, right? Like they didn't have, ended up having Taurasi healthy, and they didn't have someone like Skylar to just give the ball to and hey, you know, create stuff for us and set everybody up. So they have to decide now that they got a little younger, they're going to play a lot of three guard lineups. You want to run a lot, which you have on one hand, and the other hand is you still have to be a good execution team to get to play through BG in the half court. So I think you saw that on a couple of the plays they're trying to run to get into BG. They just had a couple bad passes. Some of it was just bad timing, and so some of that's having new teammates. And I think this was a pretty good example of them kind of trying the first time they're really trying to balance this, and it's tough.
It's real tough. But again, I mean, this team, you spoke on this a little bit in the beginning. This team showed some sparks of what we're going to see, pun intended, down the season. But it's going to take time for them to gel. Like let's be real. They're not all of a sudden going to switch it on just because they have these three big names. But it was nice to see Taurasi back. Taurasi 1 for 7 from three though was kind of mind boggling to me. But at least she's willing to hit the paint.
Yeah, I mean the threes are going to have to fall, and that's what that was so magical about her in 2018 was she was just able to get to the basket with such ease because she comes off a screen and right you're absolutely terrified that she's pulling for three, and when she kind of tilted more to take more of those threes versus the twos, like you know everyone's got to creep out a little bit further, and that opens so much more space. So yeah, it's the shots are going to have to fall, and people aren't going to change how they cover immediately, but yeah, that they're going to need those shots to fall, and that's the other thing they have to figure out too, right? Is how much are you really trying to play through her? You have her take over for stretches versus playing through Skylar, setting up BG. Like they have stuff to figure out.
They got a lot to figure out. I mean, looking at this bench, there are some highlights, there are some lowlights. Alana Smith didn't have a great game. Shatori Walker-Kimbrough, though, props to her. Probably one of the more underrated signings this offseason. Talk to me about your thoughts about this bench mob for the
Well, we
Mercury.
disagree on that one, right? Because I just said earlier, I think they really made a mistake by not just keeping Willoughby, which with that 10th pick, because you think about it, like that's what they need, right? They need that energy, three
Yeah.
four, still respected as a shooter, which I think Willoughby is going to be. They got to figure out what they're doing at the forward spot next to Griner. They start Brianna Turner. They had Kievon off the bench. Neither of those players is going to get guarded, and that's the other thing too is you're putting Griner against a stacked deck every time because teams have had years of practice of this now. Where if they're playing someone that doesn't, it's not a threat to score. You have an easy place to you have somebody you can ignore it and really focus on sending bodies at Griner. And if Smith is going to be that option, she's got to make shots, and to some degree they have to decide how much are you going to give her that opportunity versus try to make it work with them. And it's a really hard question to answer because if your defense isn't going to be better, um, playing one of those bigs instead, then yeah, I mean you got to find a way to open up the floor.
The loss of Jessica Breland for the season is a huge one, in my opinion, to this team.
As far as the bench, like you mentioned, you got to mention Nia Coffey too, who started but only played 9 minutes. That's another decision they're making. Coffey probably has. She's kind of the one player who you really trust. Like, hey, we can throw this person on some of the best scorers in the league, and as really somebody to, um, really bother those players with her athleticism and her length. But if she isn't going to make shots, and if they aren't going to give her a very long leash, it's it's a it's a it's an impossible thing to. It's another one of those impossible things to answer because I don't think you can really find out a lot if this is going to be um, the way they approach that.
Want to move on to the Fever and the Mystics? The most, I don't even know what you call it. One of the more entertaining games, I guess, of today.
Yeah. So just the basics off the bat: Washington 101, Indiana 76. Washington scored 36 in the first quarter. They're up 10 after one, up 25 at the break. Kathleen Doyle didn't play for the Fever, listed as questionable with an ankle, didn't end up playing. And they have Lauren Cox and Erica Wheeler who haven't joined the team yet as well. So off the bat, we're gonna you got to remember that Indiana hasn't had two people that are gonna be probably pretty big part of their rotation. And then for Washington, Tiana Hawkins only played 2 minutes, and it came out post game that Mike Tebow had said, I guess her back seized up during warm ups, and hey, they didn't have a need to push her back into the game. So bright side
Yeah.
on that. But yeah, I'm gonna guess you were a little surprised with this result.
A little bit, but here's the thing. Going into it, and this is my fault. I completely spaced on the fact that the Fever had half, if not less, of the training camp time that the Mystics had. So I kind of got swept up by the Twitter fandom hyping up the Indiana Fever, not realizing. Well, also, I mean, McCowan just did not look like she looked like a shell of her last year, end of the season self. She looked much more like the beginning of the season McCowan that we saw. It's going to take some time to get her in. But yeah, I thought this would be much closer. I did not expect Maisha Hines-Allen to go off for 27 points, 3 for 4 from 3, and a plus 30. She was plus 30 this game in the plus minus.
Yeah, so we can maybe come back to Indiana because you did make an important point there, right? Like Indiana's whole team arrived late, and they still don't have their full team. Like that's probably that's a pretty big deal when all these teams have had a tough time just ramping up and making sure they're ready, even just conditioning wise, let alone having 10, 11, 12 bodies. But yeah, Hines Allen looked great. Uh, I think she shot the three with confidence. I think she made her three makes were all in the first half. But you got to see her in the open floor, right? That was probably the most exciting part. Just grab and go, or a couple times just facing up, go to the rim. I mean, uh, Hines Allen's nickname was the Ox, right? I mean, you just saw that strength, that sheer strength when she puts it on the floor and really just like totally knocks people back when they try to stay with her.
Oh, she's she's a freak of nature. Like she has the size, but such athleticism too, and such a good bounce to her. She's a player who I was hyped up in her rookie year. She didn't get to see much time last year, but honestly, I mean, when we're talking about Washington, to me, it looked like a team who's been reading all the press about them ever since Deladon and Tina were announced, and I should say Cloud also, that they weren't going to be there, and that Christy Tolliver's not with the team anymore. I mean, you had a plethora of players here who were on the roster last year who are saying to the crowd, hey, what about us? We were on this championship team, and we're part of the reason they won a championship, and they're fighting to prove that. And they just came out firing. I will say, though, the fourth quarter was rough to watch until like the last 2 minutes, I'd say, when they scored, 2, 4, 5 points in the whole fourth quarter. They obviously came back to earth, but I mean, they could have not played at all the whole fourth quarter and still won. It was a blowout.
Yeah, the game was over at that. It's don't get hurt territory, especially for them with 10 players right now, and you had Hawkins, who ended up not coming back in. Elsewhere on Washington, Emma Meesman, looked pretty good. Obviously, she's going to be that expected go-to scorer, especially in closer games. That'll be fun to see that from her. But 14 points, 7 of 13 from her. Aerial Powers and Ariel Atkins got you in double digits. I think people obviously expected those two to produce as well. Leilani Mitchell made her debut, 25 minutes. I thought Kiera Leslie, it was interesting to see her make her debut after the knee surgery last year. Thought she had some good moments defensively. She's kind of billed as a little bit of a 3-and-D player, so I think there are some good moments there, and it's just good to see that she can finally get on the court.
Washington was just fun to watch. Also, it was great to see Essence Carson back on the court. Aerial Powers is just letting it fly, no fear there. Ariel Atkins. I mean, this is going to be a fun team, and it's going to be exciting because we're talking about a lot of players who definitely didn't get the attention. But I want to cause some caution to everybody around the league who's talking about, they're going to surprise some teams this year. Yeah, they're going to surprise some teams. But also, like we were talking about before, maybe we can flip back over to the Fever. We're talking about a team that's missing key players and also had half the training camp. So, and they were one of the worst teams in the league last season. So let's not freak out and think this Washington Mystics are going to defend the crown with some crazy amount of fight that we haven't seen before. They are who we thought they are. They're going to show up. That yes, they outplayed what we thought today, but this doesn't make me all of a sudden think this is a team that's going to run the gambit.
Yeah, the Mystics are going to be competitive this year, and they return a lot of players that have familiarity in their system. Even Leilani Mitchell, she's played for Mike Tebow before. So, and with Indiana, again, I'll reiterate, I'm glad you brought that up. I hadn't written that down to bring it up in the show in my notes, even though, of course, I did know that. But yeah, that's important to not go overboard, overreacting to Indiana. And at the same time, I think Indiana was a popular, hey, they're going to make some big leap. And I got to say, they really pulled the wool over people's eyes with this stuff of hey, we won 4 out of 6 down the stretch. And it's yeah, 3 of those 4 you beat, that limited Seattle team. You beat New York in, I'm sorry, basically a tank off, right? And then you beat Connecticut on the final day of the year when Connecticut had nothing to play for. They weren't, they were in cruise control, just don't get hurt mode. So I think the outlook on Indiana was a little flawed from the start. And, one thing I will say is for people that had that vision for them, I think they're going to be pretty rough defensively. People made a lot of joking that New York's going to be pretty bad. And I mentioned, all the size and athleticism they have on the wing, which probably got overlooked. I think Indiana, I think that's the thing you're worried about most coming away.
Talk to me about Kelsey Mitchell, though. Drops a nice little pocket change in this game. Do you think, there's been a lot of hate. She was a high draft pick. Do you think that she's the type of player who can finally start to be making the positive strides that, I should have asked you before this episode what your feelings are on her, but I'm not one to be shy about being critical of her in the past. What are your thoughts?
Yeah, I haven't wavered. Yeah, if you want to go back and do a redraft, and you want to point to, wishing they had taken Diamond to Shields instead or whatever. Like, yeah, you can do that and get into that, but like they have Kelsey Mitchell right now, and they have a new coach. Like they have to decide what they want to do with her, and I think the way it's kind of one of the things I've was critical of with them really is just like I think you have to live with some growing pains. But Kelsey Mitchell can do things on the court that just like there aren't a lot of players in the league that can replicate that. The way she shoots the three off the dribble, and she is so fast. Like very early in the game, she's coming down right wing. Ariel Atkins is on her. She gives just the slightest fake, and Atkins bites on it. Like everyone is terrified that she's going to pull a three on them. There just aren't players that can do that like that frequently. But you have to take a pretty specific approach to let that player do those things all the time if you're really going to do that. And today they gave Julie Allemon the start at point guard. So if you're kind of gonna have Kelsey Mitchell in this traditional, little bit of a traditional two guard, off guard role, you're kind of putting a cap on that ceiling.
Oh, totally. What was your thought about Tierra McCowan not starting?
Yeah, I haven't had a chance to catch up and see if anyone put anything out post game on that yet. Um, like my opinion and like watching the game, like McCowan is not ready to defend a team like Washington. Like she just can't. She just really struggles when she has to cover a lot of ground, whether it's getting across the lane fast enough to help, uh, showing on a drive, getting back to her own, pick and roll. Like there's a trip at the end of one of the quarters. She's guarding Emma Mieseman. Emma sets a screen and just runs out to the corner. Like she can't chase a player like Emma doing stuff like that. So in some of these matchups where teams are really able to spread it out, she's really going to struggle. And so I don't know if how much that played into it. Maybe it was a conditioning thing, and just I don't know. So it's
I've been pretty vocal about this, but when Stanley had her intro press conference and was talking about her excitement about this team, and I think a lot of people fell for this, but she spoke at length about how she saw similarities between this team and what DC was able to do and blah blah blah. And I just kept thinking like, what are you talking about? You had Elena Deladon, the greatest basketball player in the world, and then you had like a lesser clone of that in Emma Mieseman, who like, and I don't mean that as an insult. Um, and Indiana does not have anybody who plays like that. Like what tea are you drinking that I can get some?
well, and one interesting thing from McCowan, again, it's just one game, but they also like weren't posting her up, so she's doing dribble handoffs, she's setting screens, but all the other bigs are posting up, but it's like they weren't, even when McCowan was out there, they weren't really concentrated on trying to play through her. So that was a little strange, but yeah, I mean, Carolyn Peck like brought up she made a good point on the broadcast, like with Indiana, who's your number one, right? Who's your main option? And I think that's the thing. If you really try to answer that, I really wonder how many people can say like, oh yeah, this is definitely a playoff team. They're still figuring that out.
Yeah, no, it's going to take some time. I do not see them. I have not at one point said they're going to make the playoffs. I do not expect them to. Sounds like you're fine giving them a little bit of they might be in the bottom four again.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, barring injuries and just an amazing, gelling and coming together. Again, Erica Wheeler and Lauren Cox, they are two of the top players in your rotation, and you would hope that Cox can really boost your defense because, as we saw, like they just don't have anybody to throw on. I mean, Mieseman, yeah, that's tough, but even Hines Allen was just really abusing them. They just um, so Cox is again, if you're gonna take her where you took her, like you would hope that she's gonna be showing flashes of being that player that can guard some of these top forwards.
I mean, it's going to be a while before the Fever get back to kind of what the narrative has been for this team so far this offseason. There's been a lot of hype, and they have not been living up to it. Obviously, it's one game, but I mean, what are we supposed to judge it on other than that? What else you want to talk about at this game? Are we through with this game?
I don't think I have a ton other than that. We're off to a great start timing wise, right? We're saying 20-minute shows and we went
Yeah.
over, but hey, hopefully people and hopefully that's a good thing for people. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, hey, I'll say this. I got a few final points on the show, but yeah, we went over. It's opening weekend. We're going to go over on this one. We got a lot to talk about. We haven't been able to talk about actual basketball in who knows how long because I don't do the math of how long this offseason was. But I'm just going to say it. Maisha Hines-Allen's winning MVP this season. Uh, no one's going to be able to stop her. She is the hybrid. She's got the build, she's got the athleticism, she's got the jump. Furthermore, I'm selling all Indiana stock that I bought. My fantasy basketball team is going to be in trouble. I should not have picked Tierra McCowan as a start as like my number 2 pick. Like what? And also, I'm just putting money down in Vegas. The LA Sparks are winning it all.
Wow. I mean, we did kind of talk about um, giving some overreactions or trying to have some fun with that. You definitely gave at least one right there.
Which one? That's the real question.
Yeah, I'll leave that up to debate. Yeah, I mean the funny thing with Hines Allen too, like you mentioned fantasy, I don't play, so I don't have a good like calculation in my brain of how scoring is weighted in the different categories. But yeah, I mean Hines Allen, I think might be a fantasy monster this year, just because hey, she can drive it, and she's in a system that's very conducive to what she can do, right? She has this great opportunity because she's going to play in space and have the freedom to do stuff like, yeah, you get the rebound, you just go and you attack. So that's going to be really fun. I guess my kind of one thing is, yeah, I mean, I'm a little worried about Indiana's defense from the perspective of thinking that they might really surprise people and kind of jump into like the 5 or 6 range. Like if that's the thinking, like I don't know if that, I don't think their defense will be there to get them there.
Yeah, no, I don't. I mean, they're gonna hope that they can just run it and gun it and put up enough offensively that they're gonna win. Which is hilarious that they played the Mystics, where Coach T, after the announcement of the whole roster, what the roster was going to be, jokingly said, "Yeah, I mean, maybe I got worries about our defense when we're going up against traditional bigs, or like I'm worried about our size." They went up against obviously a youngster, but like Tara McCowan is a big, is a big's big, and they were able to handle her, and they handled her beautifully. I mean, great game by the Mystics, great game planning. It worked out easily for them, and they just were hitting shots. And if a team's hitting shots, I mean, there were so many heat checks where if this was NBA jams, the whole team was on fire.
Yeah, so that was fun. The champs came out and performed on opening day, and if I had one closing thought here, I would circle back to Simone Augustus. Like I genuinely, that was just genuinely fun to see. It's good to see her healthy enough to have a role right off the bat, and I'm interested to see if this continues, where they're able to go small a little bit if they want to, if it works and whatnot. But that was pretty interesting to me on day one.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Probably the biggest surprise, I guess. No, all right. Besides Maisha, biggest surprise had to be Simone Augustus. Looking good, looking a lot younger than we've seen her, even in the past 2 years. Like people only really talk about last year. I'll go 2 years back. It's just nice to see her looking lighter, looking better on her feet, and obviously the knee is not bothering her as much. This is a great first episode, Ben.
That's about it. Looking forward to Sunday. See these other 6 teams.